Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-minute Histories videos. And today I'm on Keswick Road in Hamden. We're going to talk about the building behind me, the Northern District Police Station, or what many people fondly call the Castle on Keswick, or the Castle at Keswick. Before we jump in there, just a quick word. If you're just now joining us in these videos, we started in the very first days of the pandemic and just kind of kept going. If you've been supporting us since then, thank you. If you haven't given us a gift yet, thanks for considering it. All right, let's jump in. The building behind me was completed right around 1900, and even if you're not an architecture buff, we have to spend a few words talking about what's going on. It's in the late Victorian style, maybe with a little bit of a subgenre French Renaissance. That was all the architecture rage from about the Civil War to World War I. And building technologies had advanced so architects could experiment with all sorts of different stuff. And there was a lot of stuff going on in the building. There's steeped roofs, there's turrets, there's round windows, there's arched windows. I think there's even a little widow's walk going on up there. That was pretty typical of that style. The architect was a gentleman named Henry Braun. I know you know one of his other buildings, the Eastern Avenue Pumping Station. They're not exactly the same, but if you look at them side by side, they're kind of the same, or at least pretty similar. Braun went to Philadelphia and New York and Boston to figure out what the most modern police stations looked like, and he came back here and put a lot of that knowledge to use. When this was built, Hamden had just only about 10 years before been annexed into Baltimore City. It was still called the Northern Annex, and in fact the back part of the lot was a pasture for the police horses. But inside there were all sorts of modern things going on. There was the lieutenant's office greeting you when you walked in, hopefully not in shackles, but he processed you if you were. Across the hall was the magistrate's courtroom, presumably to make sure everybody followed the law when they were doing what they were doing. And behind that there were a set of 16 jail cells. They were reported as, quote, of the latest design of steel cages. Yikes! But that's what they were. On the second floor was offices as well as the matron's apartment. There were cells for men and women, and presumably the matron took care of the women prisoners. Interestingly, there was also a special set of rooms for children. I don't think children prisoners, but if you were an adult and were arrested and had a child with you, we knew what to do with you, put you in the jail cell, but what do we do with the child? I think they went upstairs with the matron. And then up on the top, underneath that steep pitched roof, was a modern gymnasium and drilling space for the patrolmen. And then out back was a series of stables, 44 stalls, including a little hospital wing for sick police horses. When it opened, it was all the symbol of law and order, but poor the officer in charge, poor Captain Giddings, probably was not thinking law and order because the building wasn't quite ready when they moved in. The cells weren't ready, the magistrate hadn't been hired, and his office, instead of being grand on the first floor, was a little cubicle up on the second floor, described as this way is how it was furnished. An old table was brought in from the stable, covered with brown paper, and used as a desk by his clerk. I think law and order met construction reality at that point. But luckily, on the first day, nobody was arrested, although one patrolman, Boone, reported finding a dead dog on Old Falls Road and a water main break on 22nd Street. But things picked up pretty shortly after that, and Officer Giddings one day found at least one of his cells occupied, and its occupant was a grizzly bear. But don't feel sorry for the grizzly. It had company in the form of a 35-year-old Frenchman named John Penso. The two of them had been arrested for breaking into a property in Woodbury, a vacant property. And let me just read a quick paragraph from the Baltimore Sun, which is hysterical. Here's how the Sun reports it. Patrolman Emerson King learned last night that a man with a bear had broken into a vacant house at 556 Quarry Avenue, Woodbury. The patrolman at once started an investigation and found that the front door of the house had been broken and was securely fastened from the inside. He forced the rear door and found the man and the bear in the kitchen. Both resented the patrolman's intrusion, and when an attempt to put the man under arrest was made, he quickly ran upstairs, leaving the bear. The patrolman soon made friends with the bear, and it did not take long to capture Penso. The patrolman escorted the two prisoners to the northern station, where a charge of willfully and maliciously destroying property was entered against Penso. Can you picture a patrolman walking through Hamden with a bear and a 35-year-old Frenchman under arrest? Even funnier was that the house that they broke into was a former mayor's house, a mayor named Alcaeus Hooper, who had left his house vacant in Woodbury. In one more quick story, things kept rolling along a few years later when the captain in charge came in to find a glee club locked up in his cells. The Baltimore Sun again reports, quote, "Owners of a dozen voices do not let arrests interfere with the song fest." They had been singing apparently in what was called the Hollow, a steep, muddy-sided pit on 42nd and Falls Road with a natural spring at the bottom. They might have had been to a few bars beforehand, but neighbors complained, they got arrested, and they kept singing all through the night in their jail cells, which even the most hard-boiled police officers privately reported was really very good. The police station operated for about 100 years. It kept going until the early 2000s. But by the 1990s, it had become really in bad shape. There were holes in the roof. The basement was so damp that it couldn't be used. Literally at one point, a police officer fell through rotted boards in a storage area. By 2002, the Baltimore City Police Department determined they can't maintain the building and sold it for private development. The problem was there were still juveniles in the cells. They had to be moved, but once they were moved, development went underway. Fits and starts, but eventually by 2010, it had been completed. We at Baltimore Heritage gave it a Historic Preservation Award for the great work that it did. Today, it's full of shops and offices, including my friend Jill Andrews and her dressmaking shop. You'll know hers. She's got wonderful dresses in the big plate glass windows in front, wedding dresses, evening gowns, and whatnot. So I will wrap up encouraging you next time you're in Hamden, get out of your car, walk down here, walk slowly past this wonderful building and all of its architectural details, take a look at Jill's dresses, and then think of the Frenchman and the bear in the cell behind. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.